Okay, sorry about that. My timer in the corner for my recording went away, and I was like, "Oh shit, no! Please don't tell me you pedal." So we'll go ahead and do this. Final thoughts on, because I mean we've touched on a lot of topics, and we've strayed so far from the JRPG
to the MMO in general. Yes.
Well, because I really think
it is connected.
A lot of it is the as you pointed out, it's so intermingled that there's no way to really distinguish it. But saying that
Going back to what we said
there's
before,
too much of a there's too much of a schism between PC, console, JRPG, Western RPG, when no one's really taking time to stand back and say, this is what's influenced, this is how this has happened. You can't ignore history, especially in games, because we're still fighting to be recognized as a legitimate medium.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts on where does the Japanese versus Western RPG battle need to go from here? First and foremost, do you think it needs to stay a battle? Do you think that it works better as they're fighting, or do you think they need to learn to do that coexisting mesh?
I think that there needs to definitely be a division, whether it's JRPG and Western RPG. I don't think it necessarily has to be that, but I do think that there needs to be competition makes you better. And as long as someone thinks that they're better than you, that's just one more reason to want to kick their ass every day, in one way or another. I think that's absolutely healthy, and I think that's what's going to help us
competition
grow.
At its core helps us grow, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it needs to stay that way. I don't care, and I think that
I don't think that's ever going to change either, because that's just what
that's human nature.
Yeah, that's what consumerism is.
I think the West has won the battle at the end of the day. I think JRPGs, as I know them, will be done within another
the balance is tipped in their favor. Yeah.
Within 5 to 8 years, I don't think we're going to have a JRPG the way that
we remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
But does that?
I think that's where it needs to go.
But we also don't have Western RPGs the way we remember them.
No, but I think they've evolved. I think a Western RPG, like Mass Effect, is still a Western RPG at its core. It's just added. It's the evolution that we expected in all the right ways. Whereas you look at a JRPG and it's like, you've become something you didn't go where I wanted you to go, and you've taken the things that I liked about you, like turn-based. How turn-based games in general are so few and far between now, because we've become so, or rather, they've become so enamored with the idea that we want action-based games. I, for one, when a series goes from turn-based to action, that is like the death of a friend. That is a funeral for that game. I will not play that series anymore, because I played that game because it was turn-based. I
certainly don't mind action games at all, but I agree. I like turn-based games.
The things that are turn-based should stay turn-based, in my opinion. And it sucks to see that stuff go away. But final thoughts for me. I think that the competition is healthy. I hope that there continues to be a competition in one way or another. I think the JRPGs are pretty much dead. Western RPGs have definitely won, and that's thanks to BioWare, and there's no hard feelings. I prefer the JRPGs, but I'm not bitching because I've got a Mass Effect 2 or a Knights of the Old Republic to play. And you kind of heard what I had to say earlier as far as where the MMOs are heading. I think it's absolutely going to go in that direction, and I think it's going to be good for everybody at the end of the day. And, I'm excited for that future. So, I don't have any love lost in the gaming industry for that. It just sucks that I'm not going to have another Chrono Trigger, ever again, or another Final Fantasy VIII to play.
But jumping on that, is it better that way? Because now
I don't think it's better. Or really
I can't see any other way for things to be.
I look at it this way of, especially nowadays, our childhood is being raped from movies, Transformers,
right.
Just as
G.I. Joe.
Just everything that we grew up on is being raped for movies.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be kind of better in a way to be like, okay, this was the king, and we can it will always have a crown, and we can just retire it, like we would a sports professional's jersey.
Sure.
Just be like, this was it.
I think some people are doing a good job of making that happen, because you've got people like, Naughty Dog is bringing things like Uncharted out, and Epic Games. I'm not a fan of Gears of War, but Epic Games brought us the Gears of War cast. Excuse me, and what was it? Rocksteady Games, finally brought us a good Batman game. And it eases the pain. It helps us to, we've got so many friends that have died. Depending on who you are, I think Mario has gone downhill, over the years. Mario isn't, what he used to be. So, here's Sonic. I mean, Sonic is absolutely the death of a friend in Sonic. But,
Sonic Generations is the last paddle on that defibrillator.
Yeah, and so for every Sonic that we've lost, for a few years there, they kept coming back as these zombified, soulless versions of themselves. I'm like, please just stay dead. We don't want you anymore. Just let us remember you fondly.
Shotgun.
Yeah, but we had no more friends to play with, and so they kept making them because they didn't have the whatever to come up with another character. But thank God we've got people that are actually coming up with great new IPs now. We had a drought of IPs or decent ones at least, but now we've got Infamous, and now we've got Uncharted, and now we've got Demon Souls, and now we've
Even
got
more like experimental games like Catherine did really well. It's a completely different game, but I was actually surprised they did as well as a good. That's a good sign, though. I believe.
that's good, but I'm more talking about icons. I think that we need characters in games that we need series.
Well, you're talking about something completely different. Yeah, the icons are important. That's what we relate to. That's what how we get into those worlds.
But those are what our pillars were, where we had series and companies we could count on, and they all need a face. And I think we're getting some identity again, from those, thanks to some really smart people that are actually listening and making games that they want to play that we can play. And I think it's a good thing, regardless of RPGs or anything else. Just games in general, they're taking they're scavenging the dead bodies of my lost RPG comrades and taking all the good bits and grafting them onto themselves in some sort of odd nemesis type creature.
Speaking of nemesis, but okay, yeah, but yeah. Final thoughts on that, though. I mean, speaking about death of a friend. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I have. It's just this is completely out of context. I understand that, but it's just humor me for this example. Like say I had like my mother. I love her to death. Blah 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 blah, and then she passes away. You don't want to replace her. What the experiences you had are specific to her, and they're memorable because of that. You don't want to replace that. And it's the same thing. I would love to have the same feeling that I had when I played Chrono Cross for the first time or played Final Fantasy X for the first time. And I want to see the JRPG evolve and become what I think it could be. But at the same time, I completely understand looking at it in a certain way. I understand it, the moments that I had with these great games that I consider, my childhood, I mean, they've already come and passed. That's the fact, They're past. They're in the past. But I think JRPGs need to just keep evolving. You look at the cultural thing. Japan has a lot to offer that the Western side of the industry doesn't have to offer.
We've been taking Japanese influence for years.
Yeah.
Anime, music.
And their culture still has things to offer. And I think they're struggling to find that spot because let's face it. I mean, that's the Western side of the video game industry is dominating completely. It's just utterly dominating. But
my final thoughts on it are actually very contradictory to yours. I don't think that there has to be direct competition, at least between JRPG, Western RPGs. There doesn't have to be. I think there needs to be a lot of meshing because I've spent a lot of time talking about video games as an art medium, and you don't have to have action movies competing with romance. You're always going to have a different target audience. The only reason why I'd want to see competition is to keep the technology advancing, and there's never going to be a problem with that. There's never going to be a problem with technology advancing, but I want to see games more as a medium for expression. And I don't think there needs to be.
I think they're moving in that light with like the way movies and music and stuff. They're falling into that category.
I know they're trying, but they're hitting a lot of hurdles. But there's always hurdles in that. I mean, cinema has only been a legitimate art form for
50 years,
50 some odd years.
I believe like they just recently realized video games as a viable art form, but they still have their detractors though. There's still people saying, "Oh, that's bullshit."
As someone asked in one of my Q&A videos, what you would consider a game, an artistic game, I said something like Okami. I would consider Okami art. I would not consider Call of Duty art.
Yeah.
Call of Duty is entertainment.
It's entertainment, but it's not art. And just as there are movies that are art, there are movies that are entertainment. I would not consider American Pie on the same footing as Citizen Kane or Shawshank. But I really think games need to a lot of the separation and the fanboyism needs to
the fanboyism needs to die. I will say that right now. The fanboyism is detrimental to everything.
And I mean, I will admit I'm a fanboy, but not the only console that I could ever say I'm a fanboy for would have been the Saturn. That's because I grew up with it. But you and I share the same opinion. It's not the system that makes the game; it's the developers that make the game. for the system.
Right.
The system is the conduit.
The system's the conduit. If I want to play a good game, I'm going to play a good game. I mean,
On whatever system.
my wall of systems, my wall of games, I don't discriminate. If a good game comes out on the system, I'm not going to say, oh, well, I'm not going to get that because
it's on blah, blah, blah
You bring up a super valid point that I just want to touch on real quick was I mean, you go on any forum and anytime somebody brings up a difference between a game between different systems, like the Wii 360 or PS3, I understand it costs a lot of money. Some people can only buy one, maybe two at tops. Some of us are lucky enough to be able to have all that we want to get, but some people can't have
or
that.
just sacrifice eating for a week.
It's all right. Our kids, blah, whatever. But I mean, but it's just absolutely asinine when you go you'll read a forum on any major video game publication website like IGN or 1UP or something like that. People they seem to have to feel like they have to defend their purchase to other people. Like, okay, you got the PS3, I got the 360. Well, fuck you. Your thing's a piece of shit. And these are the reasons why.
You and I had this problem on specifically the 1UP forums of just the vehement fanboyism, especially that one guy who's just PS3.
Fucking hard, game master.
It can do nothing but bad for the industry at large.
Yeah, fanboyism hurts the industry, but I really think if we build some bridges between a lot of these things, I really see, because of the coming full circle, I really see the Japanese RPG market, the Western RPG market, just shaking hands. I mean, we can play nice, and we can come up with some next level shit.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see, like you were talking earlier about, a full 3D, like a Fire Emblem. I would love to see an upgrade to like another Shining Force with the Valkyria Chronicles, the first person, but with I can move anywhere and then the terrain changes all these different factors, and then I can look around and see. And
that's exactly what I was talking. I didn't even finish that thought now that I think about it, but I think you'll get just from this, what I'm getting at is, say you have two characters, run past one another. So you have a guy, you want to move him from here to here, and there's a bad guy in between. He could have a skill that lets him attack, on the way through. And where some games would have just had him, walk, a slash appears across the screen, and he just ends up where. Why not have him do something really cinematic? Like, he runs at him, and when he gets close enough, he runs up the wall and slashes past him, and does a flip and lands on their side of him, stuff like that. If they could program that stuff into the engine, I guarantee you, there's fucking ways to do it. Just be so much more cinematic and so much more attention to detail, and customize the things that you're doing to the to the actions in the game. You can make something like an RPG popular and have that mass appeal that's going to get you the money to keep making those games you want to make.
I think you touched on a really important thing there. To get a little bit out of context here, is just that the difference between being cinematic and being interactive. Video games, by their nature, of course, are an interactive medium. We all know that. But I think a big difference between Eastern and Western RPGs that we didn't really touch upon, and I stretch this out a little bit, but JRPGs are known for being much more cinematic, whereas the whole point of games like BioWare's Mass Effect is to get you to interact much more and stuff like that.
I was actually
You're watching JRPGs more so.
I was going to talk about that as well.
Mass Effect.
Talking about the cinematic aspect, the Final Fantasies have always been overly cinematic.
Yeah.
And
I think they're overly cinematic in the wrong areas, and that's what I think is caused their decline. Because you said in your final thought that the JRPG as we know it is dead, and I think it's because the developers have kind of gone in the cinematic in the wrong direction. If you look at any of the earlier Final Fantasies versus 13, 13 was linear, but very cinematic, but very linear, very little interaction.
Yeah.
But very cinematic.
Yeah, you just gotta hit the high notes and control from there.
But what if they went the exact opposite route? They made it very open-ended and very cinematic in that aspect, but they have a more loosely interweaving story. Would that bring back the JRPG as we know it from the brink of death as it is now?
That's the big thing right there, is that it's just story, and I think you'll both agree with me. I mean, reason I love Final Fantasy X is probably my favorite game. I will admit that. It's because of the story. The gameplay is great. I enjoyed it. I enjoy traditional RPGs, but I mean, the story is what resonated with me, and I think that's what we need to connect with any given art form. Music, movies, books, whatever the case may be. But I think that's a big part of it, though.
I think unfortunately the stuff that we come to expect from Japanese games was the model was doomed to become outdated, and whereas Western RPGs left things so open and Japanese RPGs had to follow a very specific formula. The problem is, as technology advances, the possibilities for the people that had that were so open to begin with. You take something like Zork, and you end up with something like Skyrim, versus you take something like Final Fantasy One, end up with something like Final Fantasy 13. All you've really done is complicated the narrative, the combat system, and changed the graphics up a bit. And a lot of that just comes from the sheer length. But I mean, that's what you get because really the question is, okay, if let's say on day one they've got the Nintendo Entertainment System, and on day two they've got the PlayStation 3, and that's the logical progression. What you get of Final Fantasy 1 to Final Fantasy 13. This is of course what we would get. We have a more complicated version of the same thing we had in 1987. Versus you look at something like maybe Zork's not a good example, but some of the original you're looking about the original Dungeons and Dragons games on the computer versus something like a Mass Effect or a Knights of the Old Republic.
We have a good example at work with that, with like the DOS. All you're doing, all a game like Skyrim compared to Zork is technology. I mean, it's fancied up more, but at its base, they're numbers. Their information. They're basically exactly the same.
I'm saying the opposite of that. I'm saying that Japanese games have just followed that very linear path to just we're the exact same thing. We're just prettier. Whereas something like these Western games have taken a concept and have evolved it and have changed it and have added to the idea until it's become you expect so much more out of it than you originally did. Versus with a Japanese role-playing game, you want a story and you want your character to get stronger by the end of the game and you want to do cooler stuff, by the end of it. Versus with a Western game, you want to experience this world, you want to experience the narrative on a personal level, but you also want to be immersed in this entire world.
With that, would you say that evolution, jrpgs have become MMOs? Because the same formula exists there, except you go from the single player to the multiplayer, but the same core gameplay is there, just expanded upon. I see very little differences between Final Fantasy, the single player Final Fantasies, and World of Warcraft, as far as customization for your specs,
Sure.
your classes, your equipment, the amount of and what you put in. I see very little difference between those two. Is it entirely possible that we're just all kind of looking at this in the wrong light?
I mean, at least for me, I don't value the same the things that I see a huge difference between like a Final Fantasy and I wouldn't agree with that, but someone like if that's what you take away from this is the core of that game and this is the core of World of Warcraft and you make that relation, I can understand it. But for me, what those games are about is that linear narrative that allows you to do things you could not do with a more open
I think
narrative.
Penny Arcade made a good point about that was when he was complaining about what was the Taiko game, I forget their names. He was speaking about, it might not have been Final Fantasy, but he was talking about a jrpg. It might have been White Knight Chronicles or something, but he stated that it was Enchanted Arms, one of the release games for like Xbox 360 years ago. And he was talking about this game, and that game had some very big problems, voice acting not being the first or the only one. But he's made a very important point was that a lot of the reviews for like a game like Enchanted Arms seem to be nailing on it for exactly what a JRPG is. It's like, why this is what this genre is known for. Like you're yelling at it. It's like this is nothing like Zelda or and Mass Effect or Mass Effect wasn't out at that time, but another BioWare Western RPG game that came out before that. But he made a very good point about that though. So.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of things. So I mean, there's really no clear-cut way for the industry to go at this point, which I'm both very relieved about and I'm also very terrified because that means that there's a possibility that the industry will cause this niche market to die because we've already said that RPGs have infiltrated so many other forms of game type that this type could die off.
They'll just live vicariously through other types.
Through other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm very excited to see that this is the future of gaming, but it's also one of those a very uncertain future.
Because we're not sure.
We're
it
not
could
sure
go either way. I mean, I think one big point needs to be made was just that up until the last this current generation of systems, Mass Effect has taken. You can look at it and say, like point out a lot of things it has taken from great JRPGs of the past, including like Final Fantasy VII or beyond that, Chrono Trigger even games as old as that. You know, games like that have set the bar before Mass Effect ever came around. And I think now it's Japan, the Japanese industry's turn to kind of take a cue from the Western developers. I think they're doing it a little bit wrong right now. You know, like you mentioned earlier, you know, sourcing or outsourcing Devil May Cry and these other games, saying here we're going to give these to Western developers and not really touch them at all. I don't think that's the right direction, but I think they do need to take a hint from Western
I
developers.
really think you said in your thoughts that JRPGs are dead. I don't think they're dead because they still have a very good market on the handhelds. I think that the developers need to step their game up as much as the Western developers has. And it goes back to your statement of Kinji Inafune and other outspoken developers who have said that the Japanese market has hit a plateau of stagnation. I think if the Japanese market steps up the same way that BioWare has stepped up and that other the Bethesda has stepped up, I think that if Sega, if Square, if Nintendo and Sony step up to the plate the same way that these Western developers and we are going to give you a run for your money.
The potential is definitely there.
We will see another golden age in gaming.
There's two things that sell me on that, and you're right, the potential's definitely there. I just don't think it will. I don't think it's probable, but Valkyria Chronicles and Resonance of Fate prove that there are still some very, very fresh ideas that we haven't explored. And for anyone that hasn't played it, that is a fan of Japanese role-playing games, go pick up a copy of Resonance of Fate, use the GameStop. If you don't like it, just return it. But go pick up a used copy of Resonance of Fate. It's PS3.
I can vouch for Valkyria Chronicles as well. Like that's.
I cannot stress, like, this is absolutely the evolution of where we want Japanese. This is exactly what I was talking about with my Fire Emblem concept. Now that I think about it, it's got all the cinematic flair. It's got everything that we like as far as the numbers and the customization, all this stuff. It's got all the stuff for the story, and it's got that very Japanese, anime inspired, aesthetic. And it's got everything that we would expect from an evolution of RPGs, whereas Square Enix has stepped away from and is sort of going so far away from that. For all intents and purposes, Resonance of Fate makes a better Final Fantasy 13 than Final Fantasy 13 does. Quite honestly, if I didn't know jack shit about Final Fantasy 13, if I was in a coma and woke up, you would absolutely show me Resonance of Fate, and I could be convinced 100% that is Final Fantasy 13. That's Sega, and so is Valkyria Chronicles. Yeah. So whoever's employing these people at Sega, they have the right idea.
Sega, yeah. They're gonna do. Take note. Keep them there.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm gonna pass it off to the viewers. We've all talked a lot. This is well over an hour and a half's worth of a video at this point, I would say. So I'm gonna split this up into several videos and just upload it throughout the day. But I want the viewers to jump in on it like they did with the last one, with our last one. Especially anyone who's had experience in the game industry, voice your opinions on it.
Thaumaturge.
Can you digitally?
Final Fantasy 14 Black Mage is Thaumaturge.
Yeah,
you've been thinking about this the whole.
No, he has. Yes, I know well. Yes, he has.
But yeah, throw out your thoughts, your opinions. Let us know if we missed anything, or let us know if we're just being complete dicks about something. And I will never say an opinion is wrong. I've had this.
I will. You fourth comment from the bottom. You're a fucking asshole.
This is gonna be awesome. Thank you for that. If you have an opinion that's completely contradictory to any, and I don't see how you can have one that's completely contradictory to any of us, because I mean we all had some very varying opinions on it.
I lost my Mario hat.
He lost his Mario hat. Please post a comment on it. Let us know what you think about it, and anyone in the game industry, please, like I said, throw your insight into it, or if just anything, like anyone who's played Xenoblade, let us know how that fits, because I've heard a lot of things about it, and I'm waiting for the U.S. release that has been confirmed.
Here's something I'm curious about too. I want to know if so Justin started playing Final Fantasy with Final Fantasy X, and so that kind of is the standard for him about how nothing is matched up to that. I started with 8 was my first big Final Fantasy experience that has stuck with me. With Chris, 9 was your favorite, but Chrono Trigger stands out as your nothing has really.
Shining Force 2 and Chrono Trigger are my two. These are
gaming to you.
This is
so. What I'm curious about is people.
We're all three are very square children, like big children.
Yeah.
But before that kind of golden age, bridging 2D to 3D, I'm curious if games where literally you had like a green block fighting a purple block. I want to know if there's anyone out there that grew up with those games and they were playing Chrono Trigger, thinking the same thing. Like, man, why can't Chrono Trigger be just as good as my blah 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 green block versus purple block? So I'm curious if that was something that didn't happen until the SNES era.
Or going on that, if you're a younger gamer and you played Mass Effect first and then gone back and have played Chrono Trigger, let us know your thoughts on that too.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that perspective, because I am an older gamer. We're all older gamers at this point, as much as we hate to
We're all
admit
in
it.
our 40s. Don't let our looks fool you.
No. I would like to hear someone who's done that. Someone because Chrono Trigger got re-released on the DS, so it's entirely possible that someone out there has started with like a Dragon Age or Mass Effect and then have gone back and played that. Let us know your thoughts.
Too, so it was the DS.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts. And with that, we're gonna bid you adieu. Happy New Year to all of you, because this is gonna be my first video that's gonna be posted on the New Year. Luth, DiNardo, thank you so much for joining me on this.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It was a blast.
Yeah. And
digitally edit links head in for me.
I will digitally edit in links.
When my hat comes off, I want my face to turn into Link. Make it happen, and I will thank you for it.
Yes. All right. With that, I will catch you all in future projects. Till then, later, everyone.